All right, so you can see they were far less ridiculous. But although this was kind of an amusing example, and I should say we're going to be using lots of clips throughout this course from Candid Camera because it's a really good psychology program, lots of really interesting psychology going on in there. So although this was a kind of amusing example, in some very important ways it does reflect what psychology is about and what we do in psychology. And that is taking behavior, observing it carefully, coming up with theories and explanations for those behaviors, and then going and testing them. And testing them out in various ways, and we'll be talking about how to do those tests in the next few weeks. So psychology goes far beyond these things. Psychology is around us every day.
In fact, one thing we want out of this class is, by the time this class is over, we want you to start looking at the world psychologically. We want you to start looking at the newspaper. We want you to start looking at events and ask yourself, what is the psychology of this? How would a psychologist approach it? How would you think about it? One place that we see this is in the newspaper. So we can look at today's Daily Texan. If you look at today's Daily Texan, for example, on the front page there are a couple of pictures. There's one that deals with a group of guys in a boardroom talking about changing the economics of the university. There's another one. Does anybody have a Daily Texan with them? Daily Texan. My God, where is this? You're wonderful. If you could read that Daily Texan. Woo! Woo! What is your name? Derek Fisher. Thank you very much, Derek Fisher. Okay. Derek Fisher. Derek, thank you very much. Okay. So let's start with this one down here. This is about the yell thing yesterday. What do you call it? The big yell. How many went to the big yell? Okay, good. So you know how to yell. Now, the question about the big yell is this. Why do you want to do this? It's kind of a silly thing to do, don't you think? What is it about people's need to belong? There's something profoundly psychological about that. Why is it, look around here, how many of you are wearing orange today? Why? What's the point of this? It's because people want to feel part of the community. And it's not just people here. People at other schools, lousy schools like, I don't know, A&M. All want to feel that our group is good, other groups are bad. That is the heart of psychology. Why might that be? Genetics? Well, there's some interesting research going on in behavioral genetics, looking at the idea of attachment and bonding. There's some incredible work being done right now on hormones. A certain group of hormones are associated with a greater sense of belongingness. We know it's related to childhood and early experience. We know it's related to perception, and we know it's related to social dynamics, to culture, to personality. The fact is, we can look at almost anything and start to see interesting psychological issues. Okay, here's another picture. Let's do that other picture. Here's the group of people talking about some of the issues associated with changing the economics of the university. Here you have a bunch of, turns out, old white guys sitting around a room talking about particular economic issues. Now this raises all sorts of issues about men and women, about race and ethnicity, but it also raises some interesting questions just about how this group of guys are all sitting here. Now look over here. There's this guy over here on the left, covering his mouth this way. This guy over here, he's covering his mouth this way. You can't see very well, but this guy right here, his body language is like that. You think body language has anything to do with the psychological state of those people? Later, when we talk about this, we're going to be talking about groups and how they work. So you can get a sense of dominance. You can get a sense of who is listening to who likes who. There's very good data, or good evidence that the two guys who are covering their mouths and the guy who's like this don't like what the speaker's saying very much. And why do we know that? Because there's some really intriguing work looking at nonverbal behavior. The fact is, we can start looking at anything. We can start reading anything and start beginning to see how psychology can be used to interpret and understand other people, other situations, and the world in very different ways. And that's what we want you to get out of this class. It's everywhere. Now, there are two other issues that are important. One is that we can look at anything along different levels of analysis. So, for example, here we are in the United States right now, and we're living in a time of one of the most divisive times I've ever seen in terms of Congress, within the state of Texas, within everywhere, between a certain group of people who see the world from a left-wing perspective and another from a right-wing perspective, or whatever you want to call your perspective, and the two can't imagine how the other person has a brain in their head. It's really quite remarkable that these people who, they eat the same food, they have the same background, they have the same general beliefs, but they still have so much trouble seeing the other side. But we can analyze this along multiple levels of analysis. This is going to be a story of this course. We can look at this divide between any two people, and we can look at it from a genetic perspective, a biological, a brain perspective. We can look at it in terms of childhood experiences or developmental psychology. We can look at it in terms of cognitive psychology, how the people are thinking. We can look at it in terms of social psychology, personality psychology. We can look at it from a community and a cultural psychology perspective. Trying to understand behavior, there are different levels of analysis that we can look at. Just as we can cut the world in terms of levels of analysis, we can also look at the world in terms of different theoretical perspectives. And the first reading that you're going to have for the class deals with this very issue, that we can look at things from different philosophical backgrounds. For example, one philosophical perspective looks at behavior. They basically say, look, I don't care. What I'm interested in is understanding behavior and using kind of a behavioral model. Another one will look at it from a Freudian, a psychoanalytic perspective, trying to understand why people behave the way they do in terms of internal conflict. Another perspective looks at it from a functional perspective, another one from an evolutionary perspective. The point is, as we're approaching problems in this class, we're going to look at them from different levels of analysis and different theoretical or philosophical perspectives. And that's something we want you to really begin to appreciate. So these are some of the broad approaches we're going to be taking into psychology. And as we're marching through these different topics, I want you to always, at the back of your mind, I want you to walk out these doors, that door or this door, you can walk out of both. And as you go out into the real world, I want you to start thinking psychologically. Why are my parents such a problem? Well, you can use your psychological glasses to help understand. And why is whoever your political favorite, why do you like them, and the one you don't like, why you dislike them? But most importantly, I want you to put your eyeglasses on yourself. Why are you behaving the way you are? Why are you feeling and thinking the way you are? And that's what we want you to get out of this class.
All right, so now we're going to, so that's to sort of give you a broad overview of where we're coming from. Now what we'd like to take a little bit of time to do some introductions. So we're going to introduce ourselves on this side of the class. We also want to take a little bit of time to get to know you. Okay, so let's start. So we are the professors, Jamie Pennebaker, and I am Sam Gosling. So, my background, well, I'm not from Texas, you may have guessed. I grew up in England, and then I went to graduate school in California, and then I came to the University of Texas and joined the faculty here. And I do research mainly in the area of personality. So I looked at personality in non-human animals, looked at animals ranging from squid and hyenas to dogs and chimpanzees in terms of personality. I also look at how people express their personalities in their everyday lives, both deliberately and inadvertently. For example, how they leave traces of their personalities in their bedrooms or in their music collections or in their appearance or in their offices and Facebook profiles, those sorts of things. And what you can learn about people from snooping around those sorts of places.
And one thing you're going to find over the course of the semester, there's an excellent chance you're going to see at least one article about him in the New York Times, one article in Time or Newsweek or on the nightly news. Sam is a very well-respected scientist who is really made a name for himself. My background is somewhat different. I am not from England. I'm actually from Texas and actually grew up in Midland, in West Texas. I did my graduate work here, and after graduate school, I started at the University of Virginia, then SMU in Dallas, and then I moved back here a little over 14 years ago. I love the University of Texas, and I love Austin. My research, I'm an oddball. I was trained as kind of a social psychologist, but I have real interest in personality, in clinical psychology, health psychology, and many other areas. My research is focused primarily on how people cope with upsetting experiences in their lives, how they deal with transition. That's one reason I love introductory psychology, because most of you are in the midst of a significant transition right now, going from living a life in high school to coming to college. But I'm also interested in how best to cope with upheaval. And we'll talk about some of this research about how writing about upsetting experiences is good for your health. And most recently, how we can look at the words people write, the way people talk, and get a sense of who they are. Now, over the course of the semester, you're going to learn that Sam and I live these double lives. We both love to teach. We've been teaching introductory psychology together for the last 6 years. And we both taught intro many years before that, me more years than he. But in the last 6 years, we've been doing this together. Teaching is a really important part of our lives. But another part of our lives that's really central is research. We spend most of our time in the laboratory. And that's one thing we want to share with you, of how important what we're doing is, how much fun it is, and how you can start to appreciate the science behind the psychology that we're talking about. Now, in addition to us, we have a phenomenal group of people who are supportive.
I'm not just saying this because he said nice things about me, but you should know that one of the benefits of being in a place like University of Texas, the bad thing is, you have a huge class. But the good thing is that you get to learn from people like Jamie. So Jamie, and I probably would exaggerate if I needed to, but I'm not exaggerating. He really is one of the most famous psychologists in the world. He's probably the top 5 or 10 most psychologists in the world. If you know anyone who works in the psychology department, I guarantee they will have heard of Jamie because of the important work he does. So I just want you to be sort of appreciative. You get shall I go on? Go on.
Okay, enough about that. We'll have a chance to talk about how great each other is a little bit later on. But I do want to talk about the people who are working somewhat behind the scenes. And we've got a remarkable group of teaching assistants. We have 5. Officially, 2 of them are from the 2 o'clock class, and 2 of them from the 3:30 class.
There are 2 classes.
There are 2 classes.
We teach a 2 o'clock class, and then we do another class at 3:30. So that's the practice class. The only one's the practice class. This is the real one.
Exactly. And by the way, if you are in the 3:30 class and you want to go to the 2 o'clock class, you can't do it. And you'll see why in a little while. You've got to take the class that you're signed up for, because our computers, and there's a lot of computers in this class that you're going to learn. You're going to have to come to the class to which you're assigned. The TAs, although they're assigned to 2 o'clock and 3:30 class, they will sometimes work with each other. And if your TA can't meet you at the time, at any time is good for you, you can talk to the other TAs as well. Let me introduce our TAs because they're going to be running. Let me start with Leif Al-Shalwat. Leif is from Lebanon in Germany, and has been his 3rd year of graduate work here in evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychology is looking at how we can get a sense of people, things like status, differences between men and women, mating behaviors, and so forth, by thinking about them from an evolutionary perspective. The other 2 o'clock person is Kat Snyder. Kat is in her 5th year. She's in cognitive psychology. She's looking at how people think and how that's related to learning, with an interest in how that's related to education.